Do you hear me talk to you? I whisper through doorways and pathways of your mind, clear like the morning dew, and fresh from my journey, cross an ocean of blue. Take just a minute, come and rest by my side. Let me tell you your own story. Let me walk you through your lives. Only a second, that's all it takes to realize there's 100,000 angels by your side. There's 100,000 angels here
Om Shanti. Om Shanti. Om Shanti. I thought I would invoke the spirit of Daddy Janki with 3 Om Shantis, which I think was one of her trademarks of every class. And I'd like to welcome each and every one out there in webcast land who's watching tonight with a very, very special, loving welcome. I know that all of us are feeling how much has our world changed in just the last few months, few weeks, even last few days. It's just extraordinary, really, how different things have happened so quickly. And I suppose I've talked to so many of Baba's children in so many corners of the country, and really I just take my hat off to everyone's spirituality, Jnani, yogi approach. But still, I think in these times of change that so important to care for myself, keep up my connection with Baba, my yoga, my study, and the goodwill for everyone around me. Because that care I have, not just for myself, but for everyone, is just, I think, what is the scene of drama which is required at the moment. So I suppose I really just would love to know that everyone's travelling well, your heart is okay, you're feeling okay, because everyone is a very important member of this extraordinary family. And I'm really not sure how many are listening tonight, because I think this is the first time that we've had a webcast like this for the whole country. We've offered it to virtually all the BKs in the country. And we really do hope to continue these webcasts on a regular basis. And not just from some of us in Australia, but to perhaps invite some of our special family members from all corners of the world to come and meet us virtually, and so we can continue our spiritual practice. Just this afternoon, I was just thinking about what I would share tonight, because the subject was making drama my friend. But Daddy flew away yesterday. And so I just thought I would share a little bit about drama, but mainly some of my experiences of Daddy, how Daddy has influenced my life, and how on the journey with Baba, the fragrance of different individuals that come into my life influence me in a positive way, give me the courage to move forward, the confidence to take the next step. And really, Daddy Janki was such a person like that for me in my life. So I jotted down a few notes. And I did share a little bit this morning, but briefly I'll share that, Daddy had been extremely unwell in Ahmedabad for the last month or so. And a week or so before, Jainti Ben had told a few of us that her heart had stopped for a short while one day when she was critical. She'd become critical, get a little bit better again, become critical, get a little bit better. And at one point in my understanding that Nevebai signed a form that to take the ventilator off, to let, drama take its course and let Daddy fly if she needs to fly. What an innings, 104 years old. And yet she improved a little bit at one point, and her wish was to come up the mountain. And so one day when she was a little bit stable, they put her in an ambulance, they got her to the global hospital. And over the next few days, she was improving to the point she spoke a few words she hadn't spoken for a long time. And they actually took out the tube from her stomach because she'd been fed through her stomach for, I think, quite some time. So all signs that she was improving. But what was it, about nearly, not quite, maybe 30 hours ago, at 1:45 in the morning, she was finding it very hard to breathe. Now this had been happening on and off over the last month too. She was breathless. And so they called Dr. Sachin. I think most of us know him. He's a wonderful young brother, brilliant, Gyani soul. And he came and he tried to stabilize Daddy, but Daddy wasn't good. And then Dr. Pratap came. But by the time he came, really, Daddy was really still there, but not quite, almost on her way going. And around 2 a.m., the soul flew from the body. And they then rang Jainti Ben. She was in Gyan Sarovar, and Jainti Ben Sadesh Didi hopped in a car and came over. And then Didi was also called. She came a little bit later. I rang Didi, and actually Didi was in the car on her way to the hospital. And that was about exactly after Amrit Vela, our time. And Didi told me she just went and sat in the room with Jainti Ben, Sadesh Ben, and a few others, just incredibly quietly. And I think, those moments are so intimate, aren't they? That someone who's given so much in your life, who's moved on, the feelings you can't really describe those feelings. And then the day unfolded. And because of the coronavirus, instead of a huge sort of funeral like they had for Daddy Prakashmani, the government said, the police said, you know, you have to be very quick. So they went to Pandav Bhavan, and as they do, they take the body to the Tower of Peace, Baba's room, the garden, etc. And then they went to Gyan Sarovar, and the police wouldn't even let them take the body, out of the car, out of the ambulance, and only for 10 minutes. And then they went down the mountain. Originally, they'd scheduled the funeral for 3:30 in the afternoon, but it began before midday. And I think a lot of you saw the footage that they had it in front of the conference hall, beside the Diamond Hall, and they just made this humble little pyre. And they brought Daddy there, and it was actually Nirvairbai and Hansaben that lit that pyre. And it just seemed such an incredibly simple ending to such an extraordinary life of love, courage. You know, to me, Daddy was a person who broke down every obstacle in her life. Daddy Prakashmani, it seemed like her life was always easy. Somehow her fortune was just with her from the beginning. But it seemed like Daddy Janki's journey was completely different. She had to sort of conquer challenge after challenge, obstacle after obstacle. And you may have received a few notes from London and from Daddy, but one I found really fascinating that she'd said about maybe 11 years ago, I have written my will. Just as I have been economical and always belonged to the one from the beginning, in the same way I will always belong to the one. Let not a single penny be spent on my funeral. I do not want any garlands of flowers. I have always paid attention that there is just me and my Baba and no third person in between. Just as Baba has said, if a third person comes in between, the third eye will be closed. So I have always paid attention that there is never a third person between me and Baba. And I found that amazing, that in a way what she wanted was fulfilled. And Sister Mohini from New York, I was mentioning, said something really lovely. It's like almost the whole world has stopped for a great soul to depart. And so rather than thousands being there, it was so simple, it was so straightforward, which is actually what Daddy really wanted. And I actually remember once Baba talking to the double foreigners. And Baba was saying that, you know, we need 3 relationships, 3 healthy relationships in this Brahman journey. Firstly, with myself, and really that whole journey of healing this very dysfunctional relationship with me. Secondly, with Baba, coming closer, this whole life about learning about Baba, coming closer. But thirdly, with drama. And Baba was saying that really a lot of Baba's children make a lot of effort and stabilize, start to accept who I am, stabilize that relationship. I feel close to Baba, but often we still feel shocked, disturbed, upset by things which happen, by situations, by changes. Look at our world, massive changes. And so Baba was really saying that we need to work on that relationship with drama. It's like a relationship. And Baba in that muli, I remember, got his finger and he said, you have 3 tilaks. And he first said, the first tilak is the tilak of the soul, and Baba sort of went, boom. The second tilak is the tilak of God, the Supreme Soul. Baba went, boom. The third tilak is the tilak of drama, and sometimes it goes here, and sometimes it goes here. And Baba was really making the point that really sometimes we're not really stable. My relationship with drama is not as healthy as it could be. And it seems like I was feeling for me that this is the relationship to really work on these days, because the drama, the scenes of life are going to change dramatically and suddenly. And if I don't really have this healthy relationship, it's going to affect me, and often it cuts my link with Baba. And Baba, in that muli, was just saying that the great treasure of the confluence age is contentment. Contentment is like feeling comfortable with who I am. It's really feeling satisfied with my role, with my part, and accepting others as they are. And Baba said the true contentment is no matter how much the scenes of drama change, my contentment doesn't change. And this is the challenge, I think, that the world is throwing at all of us at the moment. The scenes are going to change. But does this external atmosphere dominate my internal atmosphere? And I've often thought drama's like a moody person. You know, if you live or work with someone whose mood is constantly changing, you're always a little bit wary. What sort of mood are they going to be in? And I really need to ask myself, what is my relationship with drama? Do I fight drama? Do I reject the scenes of drama? I don't like what's happening. I don't accept what's happening. Do I try to control drama? You know, sometimes we have such a desire to be a certain outcome. Things should happen in a certain way. Do I accept my part in drama? Do I accept others' parts in drama? If not, then maybe this is the time to really start to heal my relationship with drama. Because a thought I have had recently, and it comes up every so often, that actually the drama's perfect. The drama is perfect. It's eternal. It will never, ever change. It's absolutely perfect. And when I start to say this is not good, the scenes of drama, the change in the world, this virus, work, jobs, it's in a way, Baba was saying, that's a body-conscious attitude towards drama. When I say this is not good drama, you know, this idea there's good drama and bad drama. Drama just is, it's perfect. And in a way, perfection is aligning myself with the scenes of drama so they don't really control how I feel inside. And I actually remember Daddy Janki telling us once she was having lunch with Daddy Prakashmani. And she said something had happened, some story. And so she actually did a lot of theatre. She was, as you know, Daddy was an incredible actress. Do you remember how good an actress she was? And she was actually showing Daddy Ji was just sitting at the table eating her food, and Daddy Janki was sitting beside her. She said, Daddy, they said this and they did this, and Daddy Ji just kept eating. And then they went here and this happened and that happened, and Daddy just kept eating. And Daddy Janki said, I talked for 5 minutes just describing this story, people's reactions, what's going on. And when I finished, Daddy Ji had just been eating, not even looking at her, just eating. She just turned around and said, drama? And I remember Daddy Janki saying, it just hit me so deeply. How deep is the habit to allow the external world to sort of, you know, drive my thinking and drive my feeling and drive my inner world. And I even remember when Daddy Ji left her body. This was in 2007, and I was there. And I'd arrived the day before Daddy Ji had left the body, and the morning she left the body, I had gone into Daddy Ji's room. I'd gone to see Nevebai, and he told me, go and see Daddy. So I went into Daddy Ji's room, and it was actually breakfast time. No one was there. And Daddy Ji was just lying in her bed, but she had all sorts of tubes connected to a machine, blood pressure and things like that. And she was so still, really the sleeping beauty. And then I looked at the machine, and it was fluctuating, you know, 200, 70, 41, 173. It was really fluctuating. And I left, and then I came back about an hour later, and a lot of people had gathered outside Daddyji's room. And Shiluben came up. I was standing with Sister Denise, and Shiluben came up and said to us, Daddyji's leaving the body. Come with me. So we went into Daddyji's room. And it's one of those incredible images I can see as clear as it was now. And Daddyji was lying in the bed. On one side, there was Daddy Gulzar, Daddy Janki, Daddy Ratmahini, Daddy Manohar Indra, a lot of the senior sisters, Muni Ben, Mohini Ben. On the other side was Ramesh Bai, Brijmohan Bai, Niver Bai, etc. The room had about maybe 30 people. And it was so silent. It was an amazing feeling. And I'll never forget the atmosphere in that room at that time. For me, it was like reverence, it was like love, but the feeling that an angel is being born. And I looked at the machines, it was 0, 0, 0. And everything went into just stopped. It was just this incredible vibration of silence, but it was a very warm, it was an amazing feeling. And then the first person to move was Daddy Janki. And I'll never forget, she walked by me, and her face was in that deeply introvert, serious, so deep inside she was. But I could see absolutely stable on the scenes of drama. It was just written on her face. A soul who's really absorbed God's truth and is living God's truth. And really that was Daddy's way. And I just thought, this day, because the whole Brahman world is remembering her and how she's influenced all our lives and her extraordinary courage that she's had. But she actually grew up in Sindh in Pakistan, as you know. I think she was born in 1916. And she lived in Hyderabad, Sindh. And she only went to school for 3 years, which was apparently quite common in those days for girls. And then she had this, she was a seeker, a searcher like most of us, but I think she was a very intense seeker. And I think you may have heard her tell the story that she begged her father to take her around India to meet some of the living saints and sages at that time. And he took her, and she went around India, and she loved it, but she didn't find what she wanted. And one day when she was 19 years old, she describes that she was walking down the street with her father once again. And Dada Lake Raja was walking there. This was the mid-1930s, just at the time of the beginning of Om Mandali. And she had, as he came close, his body just disintegrated into light. She just saw this incredible light in front of her. And she felt herself just going beyond and into this ocean of absolute love. She felt engulfed in love. And that was really her first meeting with Baba. And she wanted to go to the satsang, but her family had arranged a marriage for her, so she got married. And it wasn't a happy experience for her. I think there was some violence in her marriage. Her husband wouldn't let her go to Om Mandali satsang. And my understanding is that her father in the end realized he'd made a mistake getting her married to this person. Her father was a very kind person, so her father helped her escape and took her to Karachi. I was in Pakistan about 18 months ago, and Karachi is probably 3 or 4 hours drive from Hyderabad. Hyderabad's inland, and you drive down to Karachi, which is a massive city on the ocean of about 20 million people. And Daddy then joined the Yagya at that time. And she lived in Kunch Bhavan. And I went to Kunj Bhavan when I visited Pakistan, an incredible old stately colonial house, huge, huge, huge house. My understanding is around 200 sisters used to live there, including Daddy. And the atmosphere in that house, I just felt was, I don't know, it was just so lovely. And I just felt the atmosphere of love, that the Supreme Soul, that pure soul, came and just spent that 14 years with just 300 people. And the vibrations of love and belonging were so palpable. And Daddy actually played the role of a nurse at that time. And often when people used to get sick, Baba used to teach her sort of the spiritual aspects of illness, so to speak. I remember Daddy many times saying that Baba said that chest things are to do with dependence, attachment. So Baba even gave her, his view, but she often cared for many of those in the Yagya at that time that weren't well. But it was such an atmosphere of love. And I remember once in an RC meeting, we were having discussions, excuse me, and Daddy often used to come spend hours and hours in our RC meetings till really a year ago. And once she just stopped, we were all talking, and she gave us drishti. And sometimes it was just like her little eyes were just so filled with love. They were just streaming pure love for everybody. And I remember she then opened her mouth and said, "It's love that makes me move. It's love that makes me tireless. It's love that's taken me beyond all obstacles." And Baba, she said, "Draw true love from Baba, and that will take you to the final destination." And in a way, to me, that's her journey. It's just like all the things she's had to face. But at every step, this absolute imperishable, unshakable love for God, love for Shiv Baba, just helped her get through everything and made her into the person that she really became, such a powerful being. Daddy's intellect was full of God's truth, Daddy's heart full of God's love. To me, when love and knowledge come together, it creates spiritual power. And that's where she became such an incredibly powerful person. And I was actually thinking, they were 14 years in Karachi in this beautiful, intimate, lovely atmosphere. And then suddenly, because of partition and chaos, so many people died. I heard an estimate once, 4 million people. They suddenly had to go to Mount Abu. And suddenly they were living in completely different circumstances, very simple. Someone described the buildings in Mount Abu like cow sheds when they arrived. And so they were thrown into different circumstances, and many had to go home and stay with their families at that time. And I was thinking it's a little bit like now. We're all sort of in our lives comfortable, coming to centres, helping in service. Suddenly the drama's kicked in. We can't go to the centres. We can't really connect with each other like we did before. But it's like drama is teaching us, okay, children, now apply your truth. This is the training that we've all been prepared for. And so Daddy then went to Mount Abu, and she spent time in a lot of places around India. She was in Amritsar for a while, and I've been to the centre where she stayed in Amritsar, and she spent time in Pune also. And you may have heard her talk about Pune, where she had one room. She lived in one room. She said she would sleep in that room, take her bath in that room, cook in that room, meditate in that room, and teach in that room. Everything is in one room. So that sort of incredible renunciation, that absolute simplicity. They had so little money in those days that Gentiben told us the reason she thought Daddy lived to her age is because she would walk everywhere. If she was invited to give a talk, or she would walk 6 kilometers, give the talk and walk back. And all the time she was walking, every day she was walking. And so such simplicity at that time. And once I remember she was telling us that they would go back to Mount Abu to see Baba. And, there was such a feeling of going back, like going home. Baba was there. But she said a few times she would arrive, Baba would say, "Hello, child, welcome," give her a hug or whatever. And then within an hour, Baba would say, "Okay, child, now you have to go here." Just quick turnaround, just like that. So you can see the incredible training Baba gave them, but they were just so surrendered to accept that sort of training. In 1974, she came to London. And once again, that story of her hopping on the plane with her little Air India bag. They gave her this little tiny Air India bag. And she had a few saris in her bag, that was it, and she flew to London. And there were a few BKs in London, including Gentiben's mother, Rajni. And they'd rented a little place in Kilburn, which is northwest London. And so Daddy went straight there. We hear all the stories. Her bed was actually a door. The foundation of her bed was an old door that she used to sleep on. I love to hear these stories of just how simple everything was at the beginning, but the heart was just full of that love and that enthusiasm. And I actually started around that time. And one of the first programs that they used to do in London, and Daddy didn't speak English, as you know, though she understands it and she can read it very well, and was the Spiritualist Association of Great Britain. This is in Hyde Park Corner. And every week, Gentiben used to go and give a lecture in English, but Daddy would always go, and she would sit in meditation. And I began to attend that talk. And I think as soon as I saw them, there was something interesting about them, because I'd been traveling and had been to many religious and spiritual places, but they felt different. And the only way I can describe it is it really felt they had experienced something. It's like it just wasn't a theory or a belief. There was a real experience and a vibration, which I'd probably call now purity, which was absolutely unique. So every time I went, Daddy would say, "Come and visit us at our center." And it took me a few weeks to go, and I went with a group of friends one night. And I can remember we sat in the classroom with Daddy and Gentiben, and we were a pretty unusual looking group. It was the 1970s, long hair and all sorts of things. But I began the course, and Sudesh Ben gave me the course. And in this little house, there was just one course room. I can sort of see it now. I think many of you have been to Tennyson Road. And so Sudesh Didi was giving me the course with Simon, my friend, and Daddy would sit in the kitchen. And she would send vibrations. She said that was her role. She couldn't speak the knowledge. So she would help that atmosphere. But when it came to meditation, she would come in and give us drishti. And really I can say I had some extraordinary experiences during the course. As Sudesh Ben was taking us through the pictures, I had a little notebook and I took notes, and I drew all the pictures and coloured them in and things like that of the three worlds and so on. So I think that in the next 15 months that I was in London, Daddy's specialty was to sustain. I think the way she sustained with love, sustained with company, sustained with truth, and would always talk about a different way to see life, to see situations, and her own sort of stability, no matter what was happening around, was just extraordinary. And then we moved straight over the road from the centre, literally maybe 15 metres. I was recently in London and I went to see Tennyson Road, where Bubba's children are still living there. And I also went to see where I used to live also. It was above a mixed food shop which sold dried fish, so it was quite smelly where we were staying upstairs. And there was 3 brothers there. And Daddy told us this is the first Pandav Bhavan. This is the first Pandav Bhavan that had happened in the Yagya. But she gave so much care to us. It was really quite incredible. And I can see now that she thought, she'd sat in India and Barbara had always said, children, your knowledge will go all over the world. People from all backgrounds will come. And so she gave us so much value and so much time to really help us begin our journey. And she often used to say, we used to do karma yoga around the centre. She used to say, if you're having Maya, come and vacuum the centre. So often we used to laugh that all of the time we were vacuuming the centre. That was a very clean centre. Because, we were very new. I was 22 years old. And once I even remember a simple thing, the vacuum was under the stairs. And Daddy went, I was standing in front of her and she said, can you do this? And she opened the cupboard and a lot of things fell out, brooms and vacuums on the floor. She stood silently and looked at me and then looked back. And she said, I'm so careful that I never do an action that pulls the mind of another person. She said, when I put things in the cupboard, I make sure they're put there properly. Because if you pull the mind of another person, you're pulling them away from God's remembrance. And I thought, wow, that's the sort of depth of, or sensitivity required to really keep the link with Baba. And also make sure my karmas aren't such that they're maybe influencing others' relationship with Baba as well. I have one memory of one night. We're in our little Pandav Bhavan, Simon, Aidan and myself. And at 10 p.m. the doorbell rang. And it was late and I went down and opened the door and there was Daddy with a Jesuit priest. And this Jesuit priest had come from Holland. I don't know how he found the Brahma Kumaris, but he came to talk to Daddy. He said he had a belief in God, but he wanted to learn how to connect with God. And Daddy had spent the whole afternoon and evening encouraging him to have this connection with God. And as soon as I opened the door, Daddy's face was sparkling. And her eyes were just twinkling. I can see it now. Because I could just see she felt so happy that a soul, even maybe from another branch, had come to take something from Baba. And I always found her heart so big and so generous. She saw the whole world. I never saw her sort of limited in her judgment of others. She really saw the soul. We used to have one sister here in Australia called Athena, Star Woman. Some of you will remember her. And she was an astrologer, quite a famous one internationally. And she had a television program in New York. And once Daddy was in New York. And Athena went to visit her and she was just about to go on TV. And she told me she had makeup all over her face and sequins. And she said, I was dressed to the hilt. That's how she said. And she felt nervous seeing Daddy she felt I looked so body conscious. And she said, as soon as I walked in the room, Daddy stood up and went, and just hugged her. And she felt Daddy didn't see anything but the soul. And she said, that taught me so much about what really pure vision is. Just that little sort of experience with Daddy. She was quite amazing in that way. And not only that, we would often go out on service. I can remember we used to pamphlet areas sometimes. She used to tell us, give drishti to each pamphlet before you put it in. And we would come home late and she would cook for us. She would not let us go home she had prepared food. And she often said that if you don't eat at night, you'll get a headache. I remember she used to say that. So maybe that's something she learned when she's in Karachi as the nurse. But she would always feed us. And I also remember, she said, if necessary, you have to learn to cook in 15 minutes. So I never saw whether she did that, but she felt, and she used to say to the sisters, don't spend too much time on cooking. So I really loved the way Daddy had the capacity to be so lost in truth and depth and spirituality, but then apply it so practically to each part of life. Each part of life is an expression of that truth. So the way I cook, I clean, I interact is all accurate. She was so conscious of her own behavior. One of the things I used to love at that time, every Saturday night, tonight is a Saturday night, she would give a class and we would have question answer. And the stories Daddy told us about Brahma Baba, the incredible experiences she had had through India, and the depth. Oh, we absolutely loved those classes. And it was really, wasn't it, Daddy Janki, whenever you met her, she would never really talk about ordinary things. She would always engage because she wanted to uplift everybody. And even in the yajna, she was famous. Didi Manmohini and Daddy Janki were good friends. They were really dear friends. Didi Manmohini used to say Janak, because Baba used to call her Janak. When they take your coffin to the funeral pyre, you'll still be giving a lecture in the coffin. This was like Daddy Janki's reputation, because she just churned. And I can remember feeling that because that little intellect was just always absorbing truth and learning, she always wanted to learn. Right up till 104, she was open to learning new things. She had this incredible thirst to learn from absolutely everything. I remember once driving around London, and I was actually, we were going to see a man from the BBC. He was in charge of the religious television in the BBC. And on the way, we went through a part of South London where there's this huge pub, English pub. And lots of people on the street, and Daddy said, what are they doing? What's that? You know, and she made me and Denise give her a long explanation of that. But when we went to see this man from the BBC, it was a really interesting experience. He was in a beautiful little church in the heart of London. And his office was obviously a very old church, was a large room with, I would say, literally thousands and thousands of books. He was an absolute scholar of religion. And Daddy went in and began to speak with him. And yet, looking at his face, there was no sort of peace in his face. And looking at her face, which was absolutely sparkling. I remember really it touched me that when you have knowledge, but it's not sort of transformed into becoming or living, then it doesn't really give you the experiences of peace and love and happiness. And Daddy, you know, so simple and so humble, was just sitting there. It was a really interesting experience. After a short time, I was only in Gyan, maybe 3 months, she sent us to Madhaban. And I went for a tour through Gujarat with a lot of those who are still in Leicester now. There's a group in Leicester now, Babu Bhai, and a group, Jyoti Ben, who runs the Dubai Centre. We all went together. We were a group of 14. We went on a tour through Gujarat, and we ended up in Madhaban. And one of the traditions when you arrive in Madhaban was that Daddy Manohar Indra would meet all those in the history hall, all the new arrivals. And she would always ask the question, Baba often asks it in the Sakar Moli, how many fathers do you have? So before I left, Daddy Janki said to me, now when you arrive, you're going to be taken to the history hall, and Daddy Manohar Indra is going to ask you, take drishti and ask you how many fathers do you have. So when she asks you, say 4. You have 4 fathers. And so we sat in the hall, and she finished meditation, she said, and now how many fathers do you have? And I said 4. And she looked at me and said, oh, the poor boy's confused. And then I said, the first is Shiv Baba, the second is Brahma Baba, the third is Avyak Bap Dada, and then the fourth is Yolokik. She went, oh. And then I told her that she had been set up by Daddy Jenki, and she laughed and laughed. I just saw, those sisters who'd lived together for 14 years. They had such an incredibly lovely relationship. And I've always loved how we can sit in silence and go into depth, and then sometimes be so light, just like children. I think it's a really lovely atmosphere. And I spent 6 weeks at that time in Madhuban. Then I went back to London. And that year in London was really, I think, a year where I learnt so much, because Daddy took us under her wing. And I feel incredibly fortunate, because what I feel is that Daddy's, in a way, the teacher of teachers. And if you're willing to learn, she will really teach. She's tough. She was really strict, really tough. But she offered us the chance to know really what is a true Brahman life. And I feel all of us double foreigners are so lucky, because it's Daddy Janki's influence about how to really, what is Brahman life and how to live this Brahman life. And we often used to travel with her too. And the centre had little Morris Minor, little green Morris Minor. And Gentiben, who was 25 years old at the time, she would drive, and Daddy would sit in the front seat, and me and Simon or somebody would sit in the back seat. And the whole time poor Gentiben was driving, and Daddy would be speaking knowledge, and Gentiben would be translating. And Daddy's way was, I remember once we went to Oxford for the first program we ever had in Oxford. There was an American woman living there who had invited us, and we drove up in our little Morris Minor. We hopped out of the car, and literally as we walked in the door for Daddy to give her talk, Daddy looked at me and said, Charlie, you start. And I was about 6 months in Guyana. I remember my heart went boom, 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 boom. And I think I spoke for 1 minute and 21 seconds before I ran out of something to say. But Daddy loved to put you on the spot. She really loved to, she really gave that training. And we also had a little music group, and it was called Beyond Sound. And there was a brother called Louis, who was a bass guitar player for one of the world's, many used to play with the world's great rock groups. There was a brother from West Indies called Wes, beautiful singer. Aidan, who's English, and myself. Now, I'm not a really great singer, but somehow we were all in that little group. And Daddy used to, when she had little programs in homes, she'd take us and get us to sing. And one of the songs that I learned was Mera to ek Shiv Baba dusra na koi. Mine is one Shiv Baba dusra na koi. Until about a year ago, when she'd see me, Charlie, sing, Charlie, sing. Her memory was absolutely staggering. And she would often remember things that I'd forgotten. She had such an extraordinary memory, I found. And that was the year also that 1976 Daddy Guzar came to London, and she stayed a few weeks in my memory. And that was a really wonderful time. And I've sometimes told the story that there was a brother in London at that time called Vishnu. And Vishnu, he was a very committed BK, but he had a heart problem. And he couldn't travel to Madhuban to meet Baba. He hadn't met Baba. And now Daddy Gulzar coming to London, what would he ask Daddy? He said, can Baba come and meet me in London? And so he asked Daddy Gulzar, or Daddy Jenki, he said, well, you can ask her. And so he asked Daddy Gulzar, and Daddy Gulzar's so humble. She didn't say yes or no, she said, I'll ask Baba. So she went into trance. Often she would go into trance regularly in those days in the early morning hours and take direction from Baba about many things. And Baba said, okay, the children should sit in yoga and Baba will see the atmosphere. So this brother asked if Baba can come and meet me, and Baba gave a message. So Baba didn't say he would come, but he didn't say he wouldn't come. It was such a clever answer. So it was a Saturday night. I remember it was summer, about July. And we all sat in yoga. And the Tennyson Road room, very small, maybe fitted about 20 people. And Daddy Gulzar came in and sat up the front, went into trance, and Baba came. And you know how Baba says that he only comes in Bharat? But it was just amazing. Baba came and gave drishti. And I can remember just tears just streamed out of Daddy Gulzar's eyes. He didn't speak, but he probably came for 15 minutes, and that brother was just sitting right in front. And I thought, and Daddy Jenki was saying that if you're a true child of Baba, God really surrenders to you. And it was amazing that really Baba came to fulfill the desire of that soul. And it was only months later that he left the body. And I really saw that thing, you know how Baba says, if you follow what I say, then I become responsible. It was, and not only that I become your obedient servant, there was really that incredible feeling in that scene of drama. And then I had been in London for about 15 months. I'd been away overseas well over 3 years, 3.5 years, hadn't seen my family. And my father said he'd like me to come back and just see them. So I decided I'd go back. I talked to Daddy. She said, yes, go back. And I can remember it was a time, in those days, Daddy was often not well. Even in those days, she was only about in her early 60s, I would say at that time. We would not see her for weeks at a time. She'd be sick. And when I wanted to take leave, and she had been such a big part of my life, had really sustained me and so on, I wanted to take leave. And Rajni Ben, Jenti Ben's mother, said, no, it's not possible, she's not well enough. But literally an hour before I was going, she said, come, Daddy wants to see you. So I went into her room, and I can remember it was dark, and Daddy was lying down. And with a lot of effort, she got up on her elbow and gave me drishti. And, once again, the eyes were just absolutely sparkling. And I could really just see how, the body was settling some accounts. And even from that time, this incredible relationship she had with her material form that seemed to be so often unwell, but actually, she absolutely, seemed to be uninfluenced, it must have affected her to some extent, but the feeling I got that the soul was still really flying inside. And anyway, all I remember, she chatted to me and she said, when you get there, stay with your family, but as soon as you have any Maya, hop on the next plane and come straight back to London. That was my instruction. I never actually returned to London, but I can't say that I didn't have some Maya. But it was actually a really, really wonderful experience. And we actually rented a house in Collingwood in Melbourne. And it was $50 a week. Excuse me 1 sec, there's something beeping in my pocket. And I can remember that was a lot, and Actually, I was staying there with Michael and Joe from Sydney. The three of us were there. And in the first year that Daddy G came in 1976, and we had an amazing program. It was a wonderful thing. But I can remember once one sister was coming, and she had some problems. She had a little daughter, and she had a lot of problems. And, you know, I was 23 myself. I was really young, and I pretty unexperienced. And in those days, just letter writing. And virtually you would never ring London. It was just unheard of. It was just too expensive. So I wrote a letter to Daddy about this whole situation, a long, long letter. And Waddy from Miami was living in Tennyson Road with Daddy at the time. And when Daddy opened my letter and read my letter, Waddy said she laughed and laughed so much when she read my letter. She said, "Oh, Charlie is like a new mother worrying about his first baby." And I think that was really like Daddy. You know, she really had a great sense of humor too. I really loved that she had so much fun. But actually in 1978 she came to Melbourne. It was her first visit to Australia. She also visited Sydney too. And I can remember when she arrived, she said, "I really feel this is a significant visit." And we did a program at the Toorak Teachers College on Glenferrie Road, and not that many people came. But Daddy really, she filled, there was about, I think, 15 or 20 of us who were coming to the centre, and we spent an incredible amount of time. She was just filling our hearts and minds with so many nutrients. It was really something very special. I think she must have visited Australia at least 6 or 7 times. So many listening to this broadcast would have heard her or been there when she came. And most recent visit was 2009. Only 3 years ago, she said to me in a number of times. In fact, she was in America, and apparently every day she said, "I want to go to Australia. Tell Charlie I want to go to Australia." She had this thing. And actually, if you remember, we had sort of had a plan that she may visit in April of this year. And Didi was going to come with her too. Just in the next month she wanted to come. But maybe she's here in her subtle form at the moment anyway. But her last visit was for the World Parliament of Religions, and that was really amazing. And I remember she was saying, Artie Ben came with her from Inner Space, and I remember once we were travelling in the car, and she said, "I really feel 100% confidence." And I thought that's amazing. And it was really helpful to me, because you know how sometimes our confidence goes up and down, that even for Daddy, after all these years, she just felt she'd reached that point where whatever she did, she felt confident, because she gave a talk to the plenary to 5,000 people. But I remember one of the sessions, she went and met all the Sikhs who were there, many Sikhs from all over the world. And Daddy spoke to them in Gurumukhi, which is like their spiritual language as far as I understand. They were so happy. I can remember they were just so happy. It just gave them so much joy. And I really just saw, and I remember Daddy met Indigenous Australians. She gave so much love and so much respect to everyone. And one night after the program, at 10 p.m, I took her to a house in Toorak owned by a Sindhi family. And Dada Vaswani was there, who was really like the big guru of the Sindhis. And he was a similar age. I think Daddy at that time would have been about 93. He was about the same. And it was a wonderful scene. They had a huge lounge room. And the two of them sat in the middle, and everyone sat around them. There was a few BKs and maybe 50 of his followers, who are all Sindhis who live in Melbourne. And they just chatted and shared memories of Sindh, and it was just an incredible scene. But Daddy showed him so much love and so much respect. And I really just saw how, You know, Daddy, in her time, I've been amazed how influential she is on influential people. They really love her. They really sort of have that incredible love for her. Robin Gibb from the Bee Gees, you remember, he wrote that song. Maybe we can finish with that song, Mother of Love. What a beautiful song. He wrote that for Daddy. And, you know, in the last century, I think next to the Beatles, Lennon, McCartney, he was, and his brothers, the top songwriters of the world. And he wrote this beautiful song dedicated to Daddy, Mother of Love. Once when Daddy went to meet Prince Charles, and she's met him on a few occasions, Neville was telling me that Neville, Maureen, Genty Ben and Daddy went to meet him in Clarence House. That's where Prince Charles has his office in London. And it's very formal. You know, there's like a butler who welcomes you into the room, and he tells you where to sit. You know, Your Royal Highness, this is Daddy Genki. And then he tells Daddy where to sit. This is Sister Genty, tells where to sit. This is Neville Hodgkinson. This is Maureen Goodman. So they all sat, and once he'd finished and the butler sat down, Daddy got up and went over and sat on the chair beside, on the same sofa as Prince Charles, like a little, and just started to talk to him, talk. And Neville actually said Prince Charles really was enjoying it because it was sort of informal. You could imagine how formal his life is, and Daddy was talking about all sorts of spiritual things. And I think 2 or 3 times she had audiences with Prince Charles. Even I remember once here in Sydney, Harry Miller, who was one of our special contacts, he arranged a little session with about 8 or 10 special people from Australia with the Governor of New South Wales, a lovely woman called Marie Bashir. And we sat in this beautiful royal room, huge room, and we were all served tea. And Daddy chatted to them, and they were so engaged. They absolutely loved her. And we went way over the time because she chatted and they started to ask questions. And I remember Harry asked this question about truth. And I remember her answer to her was, Harry, you don't have to prove the truth. And after that, every time I'd see him, he would remind me, and he would often ask me, when I saw him, he only passed away a few years ago, he'd always ask me, how is Daddy Genki? She left an incredible impression. There was a man called Alfredo from the World Bank. He absolutely adored Daddy Genki. And he used to, once he said, Daddy Genki has the guts of 1,000 elephants. By that he means like the courage. This little, he just used to, he was fascinated, this tiny little Indian lady who's got more strength, courage, love and power than anyone I've ever seen in my life. And really, you know, she just won hearts. She had the ability to win hearts. And that's why I think at the moment all over the world, the divine family is really, you know, really Daddy sat in everyone's hearts, and she left in such an incognito way. But in a way, I think it's her way of saying, remember Baba and don't remember me. That was really her reason for life, was to be in love with Baba and to show others how to love Baba, how to come close to Baba. And some of us used to think that's why she lived to 104. She had such a strong purpose. If you have a strong purpose in life, it just keeps you motivated. And she just, whenever she got well, Hansa would say, what keeps her healthy is not medicine, it's meeting people and giving to people. And really that was the life of Daddy, to fall in love with God and just give those gifts to everyone and anyone. And she never discriminated. You know, whether they were the poorest people or the most influential, it never really mattered to her. But for me, I found that she had such an elevated vision. She always had such hopes, positive hopes in me. And I think, you know, that faith she invests in those around her, so much faith, because she doesn't see the present. I found she doesn't see what you are now. She can see through the third eye what you can become. And I found that she could see that, and so that's what she focused on. And sometimes, she used to say to me, I've got rights over you, meaning she said, I can tell you what I think. And many times she'd really pull my ears and tell me what she felt I should change, what she felt I should learn, what behavior I could improve. But I always took it well, because I felt her love. It was actually her love. The intent was to help. The intent wasn't to criticize. And when someone, really tells you off, but their intent is really to really support you and help you move forward spiritually, then I think you really, I used to feel I took it in such a good way. I remember once also, not even once, a few times, we were sitting on the floor in front of Daddy, and I would be a little way, and she'd say, come on, Bugget, come and sit here. She called me Bugget. And, for me, my understanding that, the way Baba talks about Bhakti and Gyan, my early days, calling someone a Bugget probably wasn't a very pleasant thing. So I said to Daddy, why do you call me a Bugget? And she said Baba used to call her a Bugget, and a Bugget in that way was just this deep love, someone with this deep, perhaps you would say devotional feelings, this deep love. And so I got a more understanding. And just, I'm going to finish with just a few things because time is going and we want to have some meditation. But the last RC meeting she came to, as you notice in the last few years, Daddy didn't say much. And that was amazing for the Daddy who just loved to speak Gyan, Gyan, Gyan. And the last RC meeting she was with us, she came in and she gave us all drishti, said a few words. Then she invited us all up one by one and hugged us all for like a few minutes. Brothers and sisters, she just hugged us. And it was just such a loving hug. And I remember her saying that the ultimate result of all knowledge is to become completely loving. And my observation of Daddy's journey, when I met her, she was quite strict, very much the teacher. In time, she softened and changed. And at the end, she was just a completely loving being. It's almost like as she absorbed the truth in her being, the way it came out was love and acceptance of absolutely everybody. And whether they loved her or didn't love her, cooperated or not, her sense of goodwill for all was just incredible. And I also really loved her fun. Because I think, we're on a spiritual journey. Sometimes we can become very religious, a bit too serious and intense. And Daddy sometimes has that beautiful balance I found where she would be really yogi, deep, profound, meaningful, take us into that beautiful place of deep thinking. But then she knew how to have fun too. And I remember once in Oxford, the first NCCC, it was the first one actually, where all the NCs were invited. There was only about 90 of us that went to Oxford, and now there's about 400 that meets in India. It was 1996, if I remember. And we had a cultural program, and the night before they'd invited the minuet dancers. It's a classical sort of 16th century or 17th century dancing from England. And they used to wear wigs, those blonde wigs. And the ladies used to have those dresses that come right out, they had hoops, those dresses. And so in the cultural program, for a bit of fun, Wendy from Rome dressed up me and Neville to do a minuet. So Neville had his breeches on like a sort of an English gentleman at the time, and I was the lady, and I had my wig on, which was actually toilet rolls, and also this dress, And you walk in and you dance like this. And I'll never forget, we went in and we did this dance, and it was just, everyone was laughing so much. But Daddy she could not stop laughing. It was just so wonderful. It was just like she was just in hysterics. It was so lovely to see that. And I just found as, time went on. And someone once asked me, how much do you really change in Brahman life? And I think we're always shifting and changing, but I would say the person I've seen change most is Daddy Jenki. From when I met her till yesterday when she parted, it was incredible, just the transformation in her and the way she learnt. She never ever stopped learning, I think, until right to the end. And as we heard, many times I heard her say, I'm ready to go. I'm ready, I've prepared myself. And I've heard her in a class say, if it's today, I've prepared myself, I've prepared my body, I'm ready to leave any time when Baba wants to take me. So I think that what I love about Gyan is our connections with Shiv Baba, the incorporeal. Daddy's not our guru, but she's our deeply, deeply loved and respected elder sister who's offered so many of us the path to truth, And I think nothing made her happier than when she really saw that we were engaged with this life and shifting and learning and transforming as we move forward. So I'm really holding so many lovely memories. I've got so many beautiful feelings inside of her. Got a lot of photographs of her, and I think, is she sitting up here? So she's looking over my shoulder at the moment. I can feel she's present. Such an extraordinary soul, and I think many of us feel one of the 8 jewels, the souls that really become like Baba himself. So let's now sit in meditation. And maybe just before we sit, I'll mention that the Borg message, which Sheshibren bought last night, it was in the middle of the night our time. We've heard an audio recording, and I know some of you have heard it already, but maybe we'll read it tomorrow morning, the message for Daddy Jenki. And at least our wish is to have quite a few of these webinars. And I'm hoping, I haven't even asked her, but I'm publicly saying that I'd love to invite Didi Nirmala next week, next Saturday night, as she's in Gyan Sarovar. They're in lockdown like all of us. And so I'd love somebody there to interview Didi. And maybe we can also ask her some questions. So we're going to bring these special souls from the family into your living room through your computer. So even though, the world's changing, we're still connecting and we're accessing, Baba's wisdom. So thank you so much, everyone, for your patience. Now we're just going to finish with about 10 minutes of meditation till about 7:30. And let's really remember Shiv Baba and that those loving feelings, those beautiful feelings to the soul of Daddy Jenki on the next step of her journey. Om Shanti. Okay, I'll try. Satish was just saying there's a few requests for me to sing the song. Probably not the most uplifting way to finish the night, my singing. Merato ekshir Baba Dusara nakoi Merato ekshir Baba Dusara nakoi.
Mother, take my hand, lead me to the world I understand. Mother, take me home, help me find the strength to carry on. Everything in life we have is changing. You are all I need to keep me still. Mother of love, angel of light, I'm a long-lost child, so alone in the night. Mother of love, angel of light, you have saved this soul, you have given me sight. Mother, keep me warm, always be my lighthouse in the storm. And Mother, set me free, give me wings to fly eternally. Mother of love, angel of light, I'm a long-lost child, so alone in the night. Mother of love, angel of light, you have saved this soul, you have given me sight. Master world, the tide of war is rising, the suffering of children fills our eyes.